All right, you guys. So welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you're a guest here, especially thank you. And I hope that you enjoy your time here and you will consider joining the community after we're done. So we are talking Venom today, and I'm really excited to get into this with you. You guys, on my last video, I said that we were going to do this review, and it's been a minute on this channel since we have actually covered superhero content, but we are big fans of that content on this channel, as you can see behind me. So before we get into it, you guys, I do want to say that this will be spoiler free. I promise you that, so no worries. You will be able to enjoy the movie just as much after seeing this as you would have if you had seen it before, so don't worry about that. So I should tell you that initially when I saw the trailers for this movie, I was not super impressed by it. I was not impressed by it visually, even though a lot of people were really excited about what they were seeing visually in the trailers. Nor was I particularly impressed by the writing from what we saw in the trailers as well. So I thought, man, this movie is going to be in trouble because it has two main ingredients that for me have to be there to make up a good film that it's missing. So I do want to share this with you real quickly. So you need two things to actually have a really good movie, in my opinion, and these might surprise you. Number one, you need good writing. That's no surprise, right? That you would need good writing for a film to be good. But number two, you need good visuals. You need to have good visual storytelling as well. And when these two are working in tandem together, you can actually have a really good film, you guys, even if the performances are not that good. If you have good writing and good visual storytelling, you can actually still pull off a really good film with subpar performances. That is the issue I had with Venom. The visuals and the writing were not super impressive to me, so I was really scared. Now let me give you guys just a very, very broad synopsis of what's going on here, again, as to not spoil anything. So in this movie, you have Eddie Brock, who is an investigative reporter, and he is investigating the Life Foundation. The Life Foundation is owned by Carlton Drake, or is headed by Carlton Drake, and it is a genetic foundation. Now, when he's investigating this foundation, he comes across a symbiote. And this symbiote actually merges with Eddie Brock, and that is the Venom symbiote. So from here on out, basically, we have two things happening in the movie. We have Eddie Brock really kind of trying to navigate this relationship with this symbiote that has forced himself on him, as well as trying to deal with the threat that's coming from the Life Foundation. And that's all that I will share with you about this movie in terms of the synopsis. See, I told you I wasn't going to spoil anything. So let's get into what I thought about this film. Now, I want to talk about this in a kind of a free and open way, so I'm not going to necessarily segment it from what I thought was good, what I thought was bad. I'm just going to talk about it openly, you guys, because that's how I like to get into it, especially when it comes to movies like this. So my overall thought about this film is that it was just okay. Now, the first act of this film was really problematic for me because the pacing was slow and it was really quite boring. Let me explain what I mean when I say first act. Sometimes I forget that not that many people are probably into all the terms and everything. So a film normally has three acts: first, middle, and end. So the first act is kind of like that first part of the film. And a lot of times in movies, it's an establishing act. It's something that's getting us ready for the second and the third act to come. So that's what I mean when I say first act. So in this first act, I mean, that's essentially what we get. We get kind of the story of Eddie Brock and what's going on in his life and all that kind of good stuff. And we don't really see much of the Venom symbiote until almost midway through the film. And oh my gosh, you guys, it was so boring. As I said, I fell asleep. I'm awake during some points, and it really began to frustrate me because we don't really even see any semblance of the symbiote except for the opening scene where we actually see the symbiotes coming to Earth. So we see kind of how they got here. But outside of that, it is really just kind of Eddie Brock's storyline and what's happening in his life. And that's fine. I understand the whole idea of needing to establish certain things in the film for what's to follow. But this was executed so boringly that I literally really almost fell asleep during it. It was very frustrating, and it wasn't particularly, how do you pronounce that word? You guys know what I mean. It wasn't super interesting, so it did kind of try to give us a little bit of backstory about what was going on with him relationally and kind of bring some different characters into the film to set us up for how we would interact with them later. But it was boring. It wasn't interesting. I mean, you found yourself during that first part wondering, when are we going to see Venom? When do we get that part of the film? So that was a major problem I had with the first act of the film. Again, the writing wasn't particularly good, but the fact that it was just so boring, so uninteresting, nothing really happening with the characters surrounding Eddie Brock, or Eddie Brock himself for that matter, that really made us interesting. It wasn't like we got set up during that first act to care so much about who we were meeting in the film. We didn't even get that. The relationships were kind of half-baked. They weren't interesting. There was no emotional pull or anything like that to really get us invested in the characters. You just didn't care. So then during the second half of the film, we do get we do get introduced into Venom, and that was pretty interesting. I will say it is the best part of the movie, and a lot of people are saying this, and I wholeheartedly agree. The relationship between Venom and Eddie Brock was really good, and that was very entertaining in this film. And it's really good, actually, that Tom Hardy did the voice of Venom, because I think that happening gave the two of them synergy. I thought that the editing for this was really good because the timing was perfect in terms of the interaction between the two. So when they're there together, it really is interesting to see those two. And the dialogue there, I do think, picks up. The dialogue there is pretty good, and it does a really good job, even visually there, of bringing those two together and creating a relationship between those two. Now, when I say visually, that doesn't mean that I was necessarily impressed with how things looked visually, but the way that the visual storytelling was executed with the dialogue was really good in terms of really helping us to enjoy the relationship between Eddie Brock and Venom. And I actually think that had we seen more of this earlier in the film would be being talked about a lot better than it is. But at that point, we do get to see those two together, and I do find that pretty interesting. Now, let me say at this point that some people were a little bit upset that this film didn't get a rated R rating, because there are some cases in here where some things happen that are pretty graphic, let me say. But I don't think that a rated R rating would have saved this film. That part of it is not what's hurting this film. It is the overall writing of the film that's hurting this film. So even if you had made this film rated R, and when we do get those more graphic scenes, you would just pull out all the bells and whistles and you would just see blood all over the place, it still wouldn't have saved this film. That is not what have made this film a much, much better film. I was also unimpressed with the end of this film. I felt that the climax was really, really lackluster and really kind of a letdown, especially when we wait so long for that final conflict between these two characters, between Venom and another character of whom I will not name because you might see this film. It was really unimpressive, really dull and unimpressive. So that was an issue I had with this film as well. So that's actually all I'm going to say about Venom. I know it's not a lot. I know it's not super detailed. It was just kind of my free thoughts about this movie. I did not hate it. I did not love it. I do think that this is a movie that you can wait to see at home. There's nothing grand or epic about the scope and scale of this such that you have to see it in the movie theater. So this is one that you can definitely wait for. I am kind of excited, though, I will tell you, to see what else Sony does. From what I understand, this is the first in kind of a line of villain or anti-villain movies or anti-hero movies that are coming out. So I do think that is something interesting, and I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what they do with it, especially if they take the feedback they get from this movie and improve upon what's coming next. So hopefully we can get more good kind of villain or anti-hero movies, because I do think the idea about this is pretty interesting. So there you go, you guys. That's my take on Venom. Thank you so much for stopping by. Let me know what you thought about the movie in the comments below. Did you love it? Did you not love it? Why? What are your thoughts about that? And if you guys have seen it, would you recommend this movie to someone else, for someone to go and see in the theaters? I'm just curious about what you would think about that. Guys, thank you so much as always. If you like this, please make sure that you give it a like. Please subscribe if you love getting into superhero content, because we do that on this channel as well. If you are a fan of the show Into the Badlands on AMC, make sure that you hit that subscribe button. Big community around that show on the channel, and we do cover that show heavily also. Guys, thank you again. And with that, make sure you hit that notification bell as well. We've got some big things coming out this weekend that you guys don't want to miss. And with that, I will see you on the next video.